The kings of Dipset, Camron and Jim Jones, have been arrested in a vicious backstage altercation that is rocking the hip-hop world. Was it over money, old grudges, or something much darker? The truth may be more shocking than you think. They built their empires on chaos and controversy, but now it's gone too far. This isn't just a street fight, it's a complete breakdown of everything they've stood for. The details we've uncovered are shocking, and the twist is that the fight wasn't even what anyone had anticipated. Behind the scenes, secrets are being revealed, mistrust and betrayal, and unimaginable actions. Stay tuned because what you're about to hear will make you reevaluate everything you know. The incident we're going to talk about wasn't just a fight, it was a public breakdown of everything these two have worked so hard to achieve. The self-proclaimed King of Harlem, Camron and Jim Jones, the fiery, unrepentant man who has always been involved in controversy, were supposed to be making money and enjoying their positions at Dipset. Camron and Jim Jones were supposed to be having another night of celebration and living the good life. But what happened behind closed doors has left the hip-hop community in shock and the rest of the world in disbelief. It's important to realize that these two haven't exactly had the smoothest of relationships. Yes, they were once the backbone of Dipset and a power duo, but beneath the glamour and fame, there has always been a simmering tension that nobody fully understood. Let's set the scene. The two were attending a high-profile industry event one night, their faces plastered all over the VIP section, bottles popping, everything on display. But behind those gaudy lights, something darker was brewing. To fully understand how things escalated so quickly, let's take a look back at their careers. They had their highs and lows as well as their famous moments. But if you look closely at their careers, the cracks that had been there all along, money, power, and egos that have destroyed so many people before them, finally caught up with the rap game legends who were enjoying their success. On the surface, Camron and Jim Jones were just two men, but their argument turned into a full-fledged physical altercation, and the world was unprepared for the chaos that ensued. Even though each man had a role in Dipset, it was clear that they had different goals. Camron wanted to maintain control of the group, while Jim Jones was eager to forge his own path and leave his own mark. Although they had always been able to work things out when they fought, something changed this time. The stakes were higher than ever, and that's when things started to get out of hand. The truth is that neither of them has ever been good at sharing the limelight. Both men wanted to be at the top, and their public feuds never really got out of hand because they both wanted to be at the top. For the most part, it felt like a game where the stakes were fame, drama, and attention. However, this time was different, so let's go back to the infamous brawl scene. The backstage atmosphere is electric with tension, and people are running in all directions to get into position for the show. Everything is set up, including lights, fans, flashing cameras, and cameras that are recording the night. Everyone is trying to find the perfect moment or picture, but after a few words were exchanged, then some more, until things started to escalate. It was the kind of fight you only see in movies, and as the verbal blows kept flying, things went from heated to downright explosive, and the fight swiftly turned into something much bigger. According to reports, Camron shoved Jim Jones, beginning a physical altercation that sent everyone in the backstage area running for cover. Security arrived quickly, but it was too late by then, and the two had already turned bottles, chairs, and equipment into the air as the battle continued. This wasn't just any fight, though. It was a full-scale altercation between two people who had spent years together and built an empire together. And it seemed like we were finally noticing the cracks that everyone else had missed. The violence was almost unimaginable. The conclusion of one of the most explosive breakups in hip-hop history, and the public's response was even more bizarre as soon as word spread. Punches were thrown, bodies crashed into walls, people were screaming, and the sounds of chaos echoed throughout the auditorium. Critics couldn't believe what they were hearing, wondering how two of the biggest names in the game, Camron and Jim Jones, could be at each other's throats like this, putting their entire careers and legacies in jeopardy in the blink of an eye. Jones, but as usual, the truth was far more complex than anyone could have imagined. The aftermath of the altercation was not just a scandal, it was the stuff of legends. Can you imagine that the public didn't realize that the altercation was just the beginning of the drama between Camron and Jim Jones, which had been simmering for years like a powder keg ready to blow? Let's look at what caused two men who were once practically soulmates, to turn against each other. We soon discovered that it was not as simple as a casual comment or a fit of rage. Rather, it was much deeper. If you are familiar with Camron and Jim Jones's past, you will know that their relationship was never truly harmonious, even though they presented in the early 2000s, after Dipset's explosion. Camron and Jim Jones realized that their financial empire wasn't as secure as they had assumed. Camron, the group's mastermind, was always making decisions, but as Jim's solo career gained traction, it became clear that his fiery attitude and larger-than-life personality were the main causes of the tension that existed beneath the surface of the group. Persona was no longer content with being the second in command. He wanted his own space, his own influence, and perhaps most importantly, his own share of the pie. When money gets involved, all sorts of issues arise because Camron's right-hand man had his own goals and aspirations and was more than willing to fight for them. Meanwhile, Camron had plans for the future, and Jim Jones began to question Camron's decisions and his role in the group. As the pressure increased, tension between the two only grew, and there were rumors that Camron was planning to go solo, that Jim Jones was being evicted from Dipset, and that there were deals going on behind closed doors that Jim wasn't involved in. Eventually, the cracks appeared, and what about the actual fight and altercation that ended up defining this entire story? Well, that wasn't just a random argument or a bad night where things went out of control. Rather, it was the result of months of work when they were together, and the fight was the result of everything that had been building for so long, possibly even years of simmering tension. When the two men were backstage surrounded by industry people, fans, and employees, something finally snapped in Jim Jones, who maybe felt the weight of years of frustration and believed that was his chance to gain respect and control, and he wasn't going to let it happen. The argument started as a whisper and back and forth about business decisions, but you must realize that these were not just words. They were extremely personal jabs that struck at the very center of your being. They went beyond the typical, "he's a sellout," or "he's a snake" remarks, instead being slashes at their very core identities. Before anyone could step in, Camron allegedly shoved Jim Jones, sending him flying backward. Camron, the alpha, refused to let Jim dictate terms in the argument. Jim's security ran in after a brawl broke out between Camron and him, but it was too late. It wasn't just a backstage altercation, it was the end of Dipset as we knew it. But the chaos didn't stop there. Both men were arrested after the altercation. Yes, you read correctly. The same two men who once controlled the hip-hop scene were now in prison, redefining the genre as they deal with the fallout from their actions. Their names, which were once associated with influence and power, are now all over the headlines, but for the wrong reasons. The arrest itself was a spectacle, and as soon as the news broke, cameras flashed everywhere, reporters hurried to get statements, and fans poured their thoughts onto social media. It was the arrest itself that sparked conversation. Who could have predicted that the same street heroes who once ruled the streets, Camron and Jim Jones, would be arrested in 2023 and now face legal repercussions for a backstage altercation? It was stunning, and everyone was wondering if Dipset would survive, if the relationship that kept these two men together would be restored, or if it was the beginning of the end for one of hip-hop's most recognizable duos. That's where the drama really begins, as fans wonder if the legend of Dipset is truly over, or if this chaotic chapter is just the beginning of something even bigger as the streets try to make sense of what happened that night. And it's hard to predict how the fight between Camron and Jim Jones will play out, but the shockwaves are already being felt everywhere. Let's start with the legal ramifications. Camron and Jim Jones were both arrested, and while the charges vary depending on the source, it's obvious that it wasn't just a simple altercation backstage. Rather, it was a full-fledged altercation involving numerous people, including security and witnesses. The fight took place in front of a crowd, and naturally, people began filming it. As soon as things heated up, the footage quickly went viral online, causing a media frenzy. The charges that followed, however, caused the real harm. There were rumors of assault, property damage, and the possibility of a lawsuit from the venue, which had reportedly been dealing with serious property damage during the chaos of the brawl. As we all know, lawsuits can escalate quickly in high-profile cases like this, and both of their legal teams went into overdrive in an attempt to limit the damage. As of right now, it's unclear if the charges will stand. But let's face it, even if they are dropped, the harm to their reputations will be irreversible. Deseo, who once carried the weight of an entire movement, are currently facing a public scandal that is difficult to overcome. Resolve, but the legal ramifications were only one part of the situation. What about the financial ramifications? For years, Camron and Jim Jones have been successful business people, brand builders, and artists who have made millions of dollars. But we cannot ignore the fact that their partnerships and investments are now in jeopardy. Record labels, corporate sponsors, and business partners are already keeping a close eye on these developments. They have invested in the Jim Jones, Camron, and Dipset brands. But now that both men are being dragged through, sources close to the matter have indicated that several sponsors have already severed their ties with Camron and Jim Jones. One anonymous source said that a large clothing company that had Camron, who is well known for his numerous business ventures, may have to completely revamp his financial empire due to the arrest. However, let's not forget about the fans, because this is where things get even more interesting. In the age of social media, where everything is magnified and examined in real time by the public, fans who once praised Dipset's strength and unity are now divided. Some are supporting their preferred member, while others are demanding that both of them take responsibility for their actions. The once unbeatable legacy of Dipset is that the loyal Dipset fans who have followed Camron and Jim Jones since the beginning are under fire. People are beginning to wonder if the dynasty is ending. They are upset, angry, and confused, and they want answers. They want to know why their heroes are involved in something like this. They can't understand that even though these fans are very loyal, there's a good chance that many will forgive them and still support them, especially if their favorite idols, the men who gave them anthems like Sante We Fly High and Dipset, Anthem could go from ruling the hip-hop scene to this embarrassing debacle. Rappers can turn this into a tale of redemption, but some fans view this as the last straw and are saying goodbye to the Dipset they once knew and loved. Instead, they're choosing to move on social media, which is rife with "it's too soon to tell." But one thing is certain: the public and media will continue to closely monitor every move that Camron and Jim Jones make. The true test will come when the dust settles, because he is already looking to the next big thing. Hateful memes and thought pieces about how their fight ended have damaged their love, and even though they will always be legendary in their own right, this scandal will always follow them like a shadow in the entertainment industry. Jones was a long time coming, and some fans have even gone so far as to call it the end of an era, a symbolic collapse of the old-school era of hip-hop. It comes to an end, and both men have to face the consequences head-on. The question that everyone is wondering is what will happen to Camron and Jim Jones next. We can expect a flurry of media appearances, interviews, and possibly even an apology tour, but once the public trust is broken, it's to rebuild. Both men will have to work hard to change their ways, but it's unlikely that they'll be able to regain the magic that first made them famous. As always, we'll be here